He's mine now. That's what she said. Right in front of me, in my kitchen. And him. He just stood there, didn't say a word. No apology, no explanation. I didn't cry, didn't throw a fit. I just stayed silent and looked around the house. The one thing that's been in my name since the first year of our marriage. Weeks went by. She was still there, still acting like she belonged. Until one morning, the police knocked on the door, and I said just one sentence. Hi, I'm the owner, and she's trespassing. My name is Angela Cole, and this is not the kind of story you brag about. It starts in a kitchen. My kitchen? The one with the pale yellow walls I painted by hand. The one where I used to bake banana bread on Sundays. The one that still smelled like cinnamon and heartbreak. That morning, I came home early from work. I had stopped by that little bakery on Main Street, the one Eric loves. I got his favorite, a pecan roll, warm, still sticky in the paper bag. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd smile again. But when I opened the door, the house was too quiet. No ESPN, no dishwasher humming, no half-finished coffee mug on the counter, and then footsteps, bare feet, soft, too soft. I stepped into the kitchen and saw her. She was leaning on the island, wearing my silk robe, drinking out of my wine glass. And Eric, he was shirtless, standing by the sink, like this was normal, like I didn't just walk in on a reality that knocked the air out of my lungs. I couldn't speak. I just looked at him, at her, at the way she grinned without guilt, and then she said it. He's mine now. 4 words, like a knife sharpened with confidence. Eric didn't flinch, didn't apologize. He didn't even meet my eyes. And me? I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't ask, how could you? I just looked around the kitchen, the walls I painted, the floors I scrubbed, the cabinets I refinished with my father before he passed. Then I turned around, walked upstairs, and opened the safe. Inside was every paper that ever mattered. The deed, in my name only, the prenup, signed before our wedding, stating that if anything happened, any property under my name remained mine. I had paid the down payment. My parents had helped. He had brought nothing but charm and now betrayal. I took photos of the papers, scanned the documents, sent everything to my lawyer, Ms. Franklin, a woman I trusted more than I ever trusted Eric. Then I packed a small bag. Not everything. Just enough. And I left, quietly. No slamming doors. No dramatic exits. I stayed with a friend that night, downtown near Ashland Park, slept on a pull-out couch with a broken spring. But I slept, because I had a plan. They thought I'd fall apart, that I'd beg, cry, spiral. But I didn't need revenge in the movie sense. I didn't need fire. I needed paper. The next day, I didn't go to work. I went to the county clerk's office. I got certified copies of the deed. I reviewed every clause of the prenup. I filed for separation. And I sent Eric one message. Just one. I'll be in touch through legal channels. Do not contact me directly. That was it. No insults, no accusations. Silence with power. Ms. Franklin called that afternoon. Angela, she said, this is clean, very clean. You're on solid ground. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. We filed the motion for property protection and temporary exclusive ownership while proceedings took place. Because he didn't just cheat. He was now occupying my house con with a guest who had no legal right to be there. Meanwhile, I started staying at a co-worker's studio apartment. It was small, cramped, nothing like my house, but it was safe. And in that silence, I began collecting more than documents. I pulled footage from the home's smart security system, thankfully, still linked to my cloud. Every clip of her walking around half-dressed, every time they laughed together in my living room. I didn't watch them for pain. I watched them for evidence, because trespassing is still trespassing. 3 nights after I left, he texted, "You're being dramatic. Let's talk." I didn't reply. 5 days later, she posted a photo online, sitting on my porch swing. Captioned, "Home is where love wins." And the comments, "Y'all are so cute. Power couple." I just stared at the screen. Not from jealousy, from disbelief. Because love built on theft is not love. It's just theft. I screenshotted everything. Archived every post. Every receipt from my joint account showing he used my credit card to take her to dinner. And then I waited for the right moment to press the button. Because if they thought this was over, they hadn't even seen the first page. There's something strange about silence, especially when it's the kind you choose. Not the silence of heartbreak, not the silence of being ignored, but the silence you wield like a blade. Sharpened, intentional, that's what I wrapped myself in. While they toasted wine in my kitchen, I was building a case. Ms. Franklin moved quickly. She always does. There's a quiet fire in her voice, like she's seen every kind of betrayal and no longer flinches. This isn't about revenge, she said. It's about restoration. And that stuck with me, because I didn't want him back. I didn't want apologies. I didn't even want closure. I just wanted to reclaim what was mine. And remind them, both of them, what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. 2 weeks after I left, I filed an official injunction. It was simple, clean, and terrifying, at least to them. Eric didn't reply. But I knew he read it. The read receipt glowed like a quiet victory. I also knew he still didn't take it seriously, because she kept posting photos in the living room, selfies on the staircase, a video in the bathroom mirror wearing the robe he gave me on our second anniversary. They thought it was a game. They didn't understand the law isn't loud. It doesn't yell. It just waits, and then moves swiftly. I spent that third week preparing everything. My evidence binder thickened screenshots, security footage timestamps, receipts, even audio from the smart speaker when they forgot it was on. You're lucky her name's on everything, she laughed in one clip. She won't do anything, Eric had said. She's soft. I played that one twice. Not because I was hurt, but because I wanted to remember it when the sheriff showed up. I never knew how much I loved that house until I had to watch strangers occupy it. But I didn't drive by, didn't stalk, didn't accidentally show up. Instead, I went to yoga, started jogging again, read 3 books in a week. I reactivated my freelance design profile. I reclaimed myself, because the worst part of betrayal isn't the other woman. It's the part of you that starts believing you deserved it. I had to kill that voice. And the only way to do that was to become undeniable again. Then the hearing date came. Eric showed up in a wrinkled shirt. She didn't come. Coward. Ms. Franklin stood next to me, calm and composed. She walked the judge through every line of the prenup, every detail of the deed, every clause they violated by occupying and altering property that legally belonged to me. We had it all right down to the Venmo logs showing my card on dinner dates. Eric said nothing. His lawyer tried to stall, claimed they weren't properly served. Ms. Franklin handed over timestamps and certified mail receipts. And then she played the clip. That one clip? She won't do anything. She's soft. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge paused. Then he looked at Eric. Mr. Cole, sounds like you miscalculated. I didn't smile. But inside, every part of me screamed. That same afternoon, we got approval. Temporary exclusive ownership granted. Sheriff's enforcement approved. Occupants given 72 hours to vacate. Ms. Franklin handed me the paperwork. Want to deliver it personally, she asked. I shook my head. No, let the silence do it. Why? I don't know what she did when they got served. But I know she posted nothing that week. Her Instagram went from daily uploads to total blackout. Eric called once. I didn't pick up. Then he texted, "Can we talk?" I deleted it. No response is a response. On the morning of the 3rd day, I stood across the street. The sheriff's cruiser parked outside. Eric opened the door, shirtless again. Of course. Then she appeared behind him, wrapped in a throw blanket like she was the victim. The officer spoke firmly. This property is under legal protection. You are no longer authorized to remain. Eric mumbled something. The officer handed him the documents, then pointed across the street. To me, I walked over slowly. Every step was a reclaiming. My porch, my roses, my doormat with the faded welcome I never replaced. I stopped in front of them. She looked at me like I was dirt. He looked at me like I was a ghost. I looked at them both and said, "Your ride's here." And then I walked inside, closed the door, and locked it. It was quiet, deafening. Every room had been touched, rearranged, violated, but it was still mine. I opened the windows, lit a candle. Then I walked upstairs and opened the closet. She'd left behind a cheap perfume bottle. I threw it in the trash. Then I lay down in my bed, my sheets, my scent, my silence. And for the first time in a long time, I slept in my own home. Not as a wife, not as a woman scorned, But as a woman who owned everything they tried to steal and wasn't done yet. Because what came next wasn't just recovery, it was transformation. The next few days were quiet. Not peaceful, but quiet in the way an abandoned theater is. Still, but heavy. Full of echoes. I walked through the house like I was rediscovering it. The chipped paint near the stairs where we once tried to hang holiday lights. The wine stain on the dining room rug from our second Thanksgiving. Memories didn't leave. They lingered, haunting. But they didn't hurt the same, because now I was no longer attached to who was in the memories. I was anchored by what I had survived. Sanemi. I started taking inventory of everything. Not just the items in the house, but my life. The friendships I'd neglected because I was always fixing things with Eric. The hobbies I gave up to make room for his schedule, his dreams. I went back to pottery class. The teacher remembered me. "So you're finally back," she smiled. "Took you long enough." And I laughed for the first time in weeks. On Friday, Ms. Franklin called again. "The court's moving forward. Full possession is in process. The divorce side will come next." Divorce. That word used to terrify me. It sounded like failure. Now, it sounded like freedom, finally delivered in legal form. We discussed next steps. The financial division was minimal thanks to that prenup. The house, the equity, even the savings account mine. Eric had taken his charm elsewhere. He'd have to start from scratch. And she was just collateral damage. A shadow in a story she thought she owned. On Sunday, I opened the old wooden box in the attic. It was filled with photos, real ones, the kind you print. Us at the beach. Our wedding day. A blurry Polaroid of our first apartment, when we didn't have a couch and sat on pillows on the floor. I didn't rip them. Didn't burn them. I placed them in a file labeled closure. Because rage is loud, but healing is precise. And then something strange happened. A message from her. "You didn't have to do all this, you could have just walked away." I stared at it. Hands still, breathing calm. And then I wrote back just 3 words. I did, legally. Blocked, deleted, no fanfare. Just a full stop. By the end of the month, the locks were changed, the cameras reset, the energy cleansed. I bought a new rug, painted the front door, switched out the wine glasses. A friend came over and said, "It feels lighter in here." And I smiled, not because of her words, but because I finally believed them. Eric once told me, in the early days, "You're too gentle for this world." I wore that like a compliment. Now I see it for what it was, a way to disarm me, to keep me quiet. But gentle doesn't mean weak. Soft doesn't mean submissive. Sometimes the quietest women write the loudest endings. Impermanent ink. And this wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the beginning of Mamayardom. They say healing isn't linear. And they're right. Because even after I won the house, even after I changed the locks, painted the walls, and reclaimed my space, grief still crept in. Not for him, but for the version of me that tolerated so little, while giving so much. I remember standing in the guest room one morning. The one they turned into some kind of influencer studio. Ring lights, piles of fast fashion, makeup brushes caked with highlighter. I stood there just staring. The walls had holes where she drilled too deep. The carpet had a wine stain I knew wasn't mine. And yet I wasn't angry. I was oddly calm. Because now, this mess was evidence. Not of what I lost, but of what I no longer had to carry. In the weeks that followed, I turned silence into a ritual. Every morning, I'd make tea, open the curtains, play soft jazz. No talking. No checking social media. Just breath and presence. It felt sacred. Like I was meeting myself again for the first time in years. But then Eric tried to come back. It was subtle at first. A missed call, then an email with no subject, then a letter, a real one, handwritten. I messed up. He wrote, "I wasn't thinking clearly." She meant nothing. He underlined that part. Twice. I folded the letter, didn't rip it, didn't burn it, just placed it in a drawer titled, "Not My Problem." So, 3 days later, he showed up at my porch. Unannounced, holding flowers, and for a second I froze. Not because I wanted him back, but because a small part of me still hated confrontation. He looked thinner, more tired, less arrogant. "Angela." I didn't let him finish. "You shouldn't be here." He blinked, confused. I just thought maybe You don't get to maybe anymore. He opened his mouth again. I stepped back and closed the door. Not slammed. Not dramatic. Just closed. Hey! Later that night, I journaled. I wrote every word I wanted to say to him, and then didn't send it. Because closure is internal, it's not about their apology. It's about your boundary. And I had drawn mine in permanent ink. That weekend, I hosted my first dinner. Not a party, just dinner. 3 friends. Candles, laughter, a playlist I spent too long perfecting. And when one of them raised her glass and said, "To Angela, who got it all back," I smiled. Because they were wrong. I didn't get it all back. I got better. But peace, like anything worth keeping, needs maintenance. I started therapy, something I used to think was only for people who couldn't handle life. Turns out, it's for people who finally decided to handle it better. My therapist, Dr. Winslow, had a way of asking the kind of questions that stick with you. What would you say to the Angela who accepted crumbs? I sat there quiet, then whispered, "I'm sorry." One afternoon, while decluttering, I found a flash drive. No label, just tossed in the back of a drawer. When I opened it, photos, dozens of them, from his phone, synced to my laptop years ago. There she was, posing in every room, wearing my jewelry, sitting on my car hood, kissing him in my backyard. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just deleted them, one by one. With every click, I felt something peel off. Not pain, but weight. The final file was a video. I hovered, then clicked. They were dancing, badly, offbeat, laughing like they didn't break something sacred. I watched exactly 10 seconds, then dragged it to trash. Empty bin. Done. The next day, I went to a local art fair. Not because I needed anything, but because I wanted color. And in one small booth, I found it. A painting, soft strokes of a woman in red, facing the sea. She looked free. I bought it without asking the price, and hung it above my bed. 50. Weeks turned into months. And one morning, I woke up and didn't think about them. Not even once. That's when I knew healing doesn't announce itself. It arrives like sunlight. Soft, steady, undeniable. And in that light, I began to dream again. Of starting my own studio, of mentoring women who'd been silenced, of creating something from the ashes not in spite of the fire, but because of it. I filed the LLC in my name. Angela Cole Design and Restoration. Poetic, right? On the first day of opening, I wore white, a symbol of renewal. And when the first client walked in and said, "I heard you specialize in impossible makeovers," I smiled. You have no idea. Because this wasn't just about paint or staging or furniture. It was about rebuilding lives, including mine. Sometimes, I still pass couples on the street laughing, holding hands, and a shadow of what once was tugs at me. But then I remember that love isn't just about staying, it's about choosing again. And I choose me every time because I am not the woman who was left. I am the woman who had left the door open and watched the storm walk out. 2 weeks after launching the studio, I received a letter. Not an email, not a call, but a real letter again. Same handwriting. This time, no flowers, no apologies. Just a final plea. He said he had lost everything. That she left. That he was sleeping in a motel off New Circle Road. And that he hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive. I read it once. Then again more slowly. And then I wrote my own letter. It said, "You didn't just lose me. You lost access to warmth, to dignity, to the benefit of my silence." I signed it, sealed it, and sent it, not to him, but to myself, and I framed it. A reminder that forgiveness isn't always a door reopening. Sometimes it's a wall going up, permanent, protective, beautiful. By autumn, business was booming. Clients came in steady waves. Divorcees, retirees, women rebuilding from abuse, betrayal, heartbreak. They didn't just need decor, they needed new ground. One woman walked in sobbing. She said, "I can't live where he hit me." I didn't flinch. I said, "Let's make it yours." And we did. New paint, new locks, new light. She sent me a message 2 months later. I sleep again. That was the real currency. Not checks, not reviews, but peace delivered through transformation. One evening, while cleaning the back office, I found an old voice memo I'd recorded the night I left Eric. It was shaky, emotional, almost unintelligible. I was whispering into my phone like I didn't want the walls to hear. I don't know who I am without him, I said. And I cried hearing it again. Not because I believed it now, but because I ever did. Then I recorded a new memo on top of the old one. I do know who I am now, and I like her voice better. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't rage. It was reclaiming, and in the process, I discovered something no one can ever take again. My enoughness. On the 1-year anniversary of my move out, I held a solo celebration. A bottle of Prosecco, a small cake. I lit one candle and whispered, "Happy rebirth." Then I danced. Alone. Barefoot. In the same kitchen they once violated, and this time, every step was mine. Every breath free. You never really know what you're capable of until someone tries to erase you. And Eric tried. Oh, not in court, not through paperwork, but in whispers. He told people I was overreacting, that I blew things out of proportion, that I wasn't stable after the divorce. I heard it all. Secondhand? Through mutual acquaintances, through social media breadcrumbs, through silence that felt suspiciously curated. At first I ignored it, because silence had always been my weapon. But sometimes, silence needs to be sharpened. And I was ready to cut back. It started with a woman named Elise. She showed up at my studio asking for a consultation. Late 30s, sharp suit, nervous eyes. She walked in like she wasn't sure if she should even be there. But the moment she sat down, her whole story unraveled. She had just broken off an engagement, found out her fiancé was cheating, not once, but for months. And the worst part, she said, her voice cracking, is that everyone thinks I'm the problem. I looked at her. I saw her. I saw the shaking hands, the practiced smile, the armor barely holding. And I remembered. I offered her tea. Then I opened my laptop, and I showed her my file. Not a business plan, not a design deck, but a dossier of my own rebirth. Pictures before and after, legal forms redacted, of course, and the framed letter I wrote to myself. Her eyes filled with tears. "This is what you do," she asked. "No," I replied, "this is who I became." And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just business. It was testimony. Tao. The next week, Elise posted her own story online. No names, no details. Just strength. And I reshared it with one sentence. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand. It went viral. Not millions, but thousands. Thousands of women commenting, messaging, thanking her for saying what they'd never dared to say. And I watched quietly as power shifted. Because when one woman tells her truth, it gives 10 more permission to rise. A month later, a producer from a local podcast reached out. "Your story is incredible," she said. "Would you be willing to speak on record?" At first, I hesitated. I didn't want fame. I didn't want pity. But then I remembered the feeling of standing in my kitchen while another woman claimed my life as hers. And I said yes. The episode aired on a Thursday. I spoke calmly. No rants, no vengeance. Just facts. I didn't name him. Didn't need to. Because the story wasn't about him. It was about reclaiming space. About what happens when women choose themselves. And within 48 hours, my inbox exploded. Not with gossip, but with gratitude. A woman from Dallas. A teacher from Oregon. A grandmother from Detroit. Each one saying, "I thought I was the only one." You never forget a message like that, because it reminds you pain can isolate. But truth builds bridges. So, Eric heard the episode. Of course he did. He sent an email. 4 paragraphs. All defensive. No accountability. At the end, he wrote, "You've embarrassed me. I didn't deserve that." I didn't reply. But I did print it, framed it, hung it in the back of my closet, labeled it, and that's why you lost everything. Around that time, I was invited to speak at a conference. Design and Resilience, they called it. And I walked onto that stage in Los Angeles not as the woman he left, but as the woman who left herself for too long and came back swinging. The applause was thunderous. But what mattered more was what happened backstage. A woman, older, quiet, leaned in and said, "I wish I had known someone like you 30 years ago." And I whispered, "You still can, because healing has no deadline." And justice? Justice sometimes wears lipstick and heels and never raises her voice. Then came the twist. The real one? The one I didn't expect? I received a letter from a law firm, not about Eric, but about her, the woman who had stood in my kitchen and said, "He's mine now." Turns out she'd filed for bankruptcy. had listed my house, the one she was unlawfully living in, as part of her assets. Fraudulent declaration. And guess whose name appeared in the subpoena as a witness? Mine. So, Ms. Franklin handled it. She smiled when she saw the paperwork. Poetic, she said. And it was because karma doesn't knock. She subpoenas. The hearing was short. She showed up in beige. No confidence. No ring. No Eric. She couldn't look me in the eye. And when the judge asked if she had any proof of ownership, she stuttered. I handed over my file. Tidy, chronological, devastating. The judge dismissed her claim. With prejudice. Which, in legal terms, means never again. Aigwai. After the hearing, she rushed outside. I followed quietly. Not to gloat, but to witness what arrogance looks like when it runs out of places to hide. She turned around. Eyes hollow, voice small. I didn't know it would go this far. And I said, "You never thought I'd go this far." Then I walked away, because power isn't in the confrontation. It's in the exit. And mine was graceful, final, and utterly silent. After that final court hearing, something inside me changed. Not in a dramatic fireworks kind of way, but like a door quietly clicking shut behind you, and for the first time, you don't feel the urge to look back. I went home, made myself a lavender latte, and stood barefoot in my foyer, the same foyer where she once took selfies, where he once kissed her goodbye. Now it was just me and the echo of my own resilience. The next morning, I started something new. I began writing, not just journaling, but structuring it, chapter by chapter. A memoir, maybe, but not about heartbreak. About reinvention, I called it Hum the Quiet Reclaiming. I didn't pitch it, didn't plan to publish. I wrote it for the woman I used to be, the one who needed someone, anyone, to show her that surviving wasn't the end, that there was thriving on the other side. Oh. And as I wrote, more invitations came. Talks, panels, interviews. Not about my ex, but about building from ashes. About setting boundaries. About the radical act of saying no more. I started ending every session with the same phrase, "Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy." And every time I'd see heads nod, women wiping tears, men looking stunned, because we were never meant to scream to be heard. We were meant to rise quietly, powerfully, completely. 6 months after that last hearing, I got an unexpected delivery. A small package, no return address. Inside a keychain, simple, leather, with the words stamped in silver, "You're always." It wasn't signed, but I knew it was him. A final reach, a final thread, and I smiled not out of fondness, but clarity. Then I dropped it in the trash, because what once felt like a chain now felt like noise. Today, I wake up without flinching. I walk through my house without remembering them. I host workshops. I plant herbs. I repaint walls not to cover something up, but to begin something new. And when clients walk in, broken and uncertain, I welcome them with the gentlest phrase I know, "Let's rebuild." Because I did, and I'll do it again if ever needed. But now, I build not from pain, but from purpose. And that's the kind of revenge no one sees coming. The funny thing about endings is how quietly they arrive. No fireworks, no final door slam. Just a sunrise, a soft breath, and the steady, unshakable knowing that you are no longer the same. It had been a year. 12 full months since the day I walked out of my own house while she stood smug in my robe, and he stood silent like a shadow. Since then, I had rebuilt, brick by brick, word by word, boundary by boundary. And now I didn't flinch when someone mentioned his name, didn't pause when I drove past places we once called ours, because they weren't sacred. They were just locations. The real holy ground was me. That spring, I was invited to speak at a women's summit in New York. The theme on power and stillness. They gave me a stage, a microphone, and a chair, but I stood because stillness doesn't mean sitting. Stillness means grounding. I looked out at the sea of women, some young, some older, some holding pain like purses too heavy to let go, and I told them the truth. I told them about the day I walked in on her, about how she said he's mine now, and how I answered, not with fists, but with deeds, with law, with grace so sharp it sliced them clean. The room held its breath, and when I finished, they didn't clap. They stood, tears, applause, silence, because real power is felt in the pause after the words. After the summit, a publisher approached me. They wanted the book, not just the story, but the method. The quiet reclaiming. I said yes. Not for fame, but for every woman who thinks silence means surrender. The book was released 6 months later. It hit shelves quietly. No major campaign, just whispers. And yet it spread. Book clubs, podcasts, counseling centers. One therapist sent me a message. I hand it to women who've forgotten their voice. And somehow, they hear themselves again. That meant more than any review, more than any chart. Because legacy isn't built in loudness, it's built in echoes. And then, of course, came the press. The story resurfaced. Not from me, but from others. And eventually, he saw it. He sent another message. This time, no begging. Just one sentence. You really turned it into something. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. Because not every door needs closure. Some doors just need locks. Life moved forward. My studio expanded. We opened a second location in Nashville. I hired a team, all women, all survivors in their own right. We didn't just design spaces, we rewrote beginnings. One client, after a bad divorce, walked in saying, I don't know where to start. And I told her the truth. Right here, with light, with you. She cried. Then she signed, Bye. And somewhere in all of that love returned. Not loudly, not romantically at first, but in the form of a man named Jonah. He was soft-spoken, thoughtful, not intimidated by silence. He came into my studio needing help redesigning a nonprofit space for single fathers. At first, we were just colleagues, then co-creators, then something else. He didn't ask about my past. He didn't need the story. He just respected the woman who had written it. And that was new. We took it slow, deliberate, and on our 6-month anniversary, he gave me a gift. A compass, engraved with the words, You never lost direction. You just needed to trust your own map. I cried. Not because I needed a man to complete the journey, but because someone finally honored the road I walked to get here. 1 year later, we hosted a retreat. A weekend for women looking to reclaim. We called it The Return. It was held in the very house they once tried to steal from me. But now every room was light. Laughter echoed off the walls. The kitchen was filled with the scent of lavender scones and fresh espresso. In the living room, a woman stood holding a framed copy of her divorce decree. She whispered, This doesn't feel like an end. And I said, It's not, it's your opening chapter. We all cried, and danced, and healed in the kind of silence that roars. That night, as the retreat ended, I stood alone on the porch. The same porch where she posed once, trying to look victorious. Now it was mine again. Fully, quietly, forever, I lit a candle, watched the flame dance, and whispered the last line of my book. You don't have to scream to be powerful. You just have to stay. And I had stayed through the loss, through the fire, through the rebuild. I had stayed with myself, and in the end, I was the one who remained. Not because I held tighter, but because I let go, completely, powerfully, in silence. 2 weeks after the retreat, I received a letter from a university. They wanted to invite me to guest lecture. The class was titled Narratives of Resilience. I almost declined. I wasn't an academic. I didn't quote theory. But then I remembered what I offered wasn't theory. It was evidence, proof that silence could rebuild what screaming never could. The lecture hall was full. Most of them were women. A few men. A few who didn't say what they were, but I could see them. The ones still holding stories in their throats. I didn't start with my name. I started with the question, what does it cost to stay silent? Some looked puzzled, others emotional, and I answered it. Sometimes everything, and sometimes absolutely nothing except your peace. They leaned in, listened, and when I finished, I gave them not advice, but invitation. Speak when you're ready, not when they expect it. Silence isn't absence, it's preparation. The standing ovation that followed wasn't loud. It was reverent. That night, Jonah cooked dinner. He didn't ask how the lecture went. He just said, You look lighter. And I realized he was right. Every time I told the story not from pain, but from power, I left a piece of the hurt behind. Not buried, but transformed. By the time the second retreat came around, we had a wait list. Dozens of women. Some from out of state. Some from abroad. One flew from Sweden. She said, I watched your interview last year. It changed everything. Another brought her teenage daughter, a girl who had been bullied, who hadn't spoken in months. She came to the last night's circle, stood up, voice trembling, and said, "I want to stay." We all cried, even me, especially me. I no longer called myself a survivor. I was an architect of space, of stories, of second chances. Eric never came back again. Neither did she. The universe has a way of moving the storm once the roof is rebuilt. You? And now every time I step onto the porch, I feel it. Not victory, not revenge, but presence, complete, undeniable, mine. So if you're listening to this, if you're someone who was told you were too quiet, too emotional, too much, or not enough, let me tell you something no one told me. You don't have to fight loud to win. You don't have to scream to reclaim. You just have to stand firm, calm, unshakable. And when they say, "He's mine now," you can smile and whisper back, "So is the life he'll never have again." And walk away, because you were never just a chapter in their story. You were always the author. You just had to pick up the pen